So I'm a political philosopher, so I thought I'd talk about truth in politics. But first of all, tell a story. We'll get to politics later, and maybe we'll get to truth. So a few years ago, I was out in Boulder, Colorado for a job talk. And it's like a 3-day affair, and you get off the plane, they immediately start asking you questions about your work, and it's philosophers, so it's like a blood sport. And they took me for a hike, and they still asking me questions, and I was totally knackered. And finally got to lunch, and said, we'll get a sandwich, still asking me questions. So I get in a sandwich shop, and there's this like huge board full of sandwiches, and you know they all have 10 ingredients, and I categorically don't eat pork. I never have. So I said, oh man, I can't look at this. I'll have the vegetarian, whatever, I'll just have your vegetarian. The guy said, sure, yeah, just give me vegetarian. Carried on haranguing me. Went out for dinner that night. Some more philosophers met up with me. We hear you're a vegetarian, that's so great. We're all vegetarian here, that's fantastic. You're the best vegetarian restaurant in Boulder. The next 3 days, just like that, everywhere I went. Oh, it's so fantastic that you're a vegetarian. By the third day, I was like, well, you know, I eat a little bit of fish. Now, a couple of years later, I'm a professor at CU, and I'm a vegetarian. So, making decisions is costly. It costs you time, costs energy. And firms have noticed this, and they try to take advantage of it, right? So Amazon sends you recommendations. She gets the new George Saunders. He gets 50 Shades Even Nastier or whatever. So everyone gets, and it takes away some of these decision costs. Target, you wake up after a long night of drinking, and Target texts you coupons for Tylenol or whatever. So there's all these strategies firms use to make themselves and their products more attractive by relying on this fact that they know that making decisions is costly. So now politics. So 2007, 2008, I was living in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I discovered recently that my mother tells everyone I went to Harvard, but I didn't. That's not true. Why would anyone go to an institute of technology? So some friends of mine from grad school, we signed up to help out in the Obama campaign. And they sent us up to New Hampshire because they thought, you know, Massachusetts is a waste of time. So to send, you know, to canvass. And I remember being impressed even then at the amount of data the Democratic Party had assembled about people we were canvassing. So in each household they had a list of who was there and which way individual members of the household were leaning and so on. And but I remember one particularly cold day. We were out all day and we had our little clipboard, and it was freezing cold and our fingers were getting numb from writing on the board, and I said, we'll do one last place each, we'll just call it quits. So I went up to my designated house, and it was this big house and had a really long drive. So I opened up the gate and I start making my way up this huge drive. And I had an Obama sticker and I had a Jean Shaheen sticker. She was the Democratic senatorial candidate. I get in the door, knock, and this older gentleman opens the door. I said, hi, I'm with the Obama campaign, and we were just wondering which way you're thinking of voting. He says, well, I'm going to vote for capitalism and democracy and none of the socialists on your badges. So I said, okay, fair enough. All the schools. So I turn around and start walking back and says, where are you from? Oh, that's not good. Oh, kind of mixed. This guy's going to say some racist shit now. So I start making my way down this long driveway and he says, where are you from? I said, you're from Massachusetts, aren't you? There I said, yeah, you got me. Stay warm. By 2012, things have changed though. That kind of mismatch between message and messenger and audience was being fixed by the parties. They were gathering huge amounts of information on people, not just about which way they were leaning, but on their age, demographic information about their age, sex, race, gender, their preferences in TV shows and all that stuff. And they were using that to target their message very finely. They're calling it micro-targeting. So step speeches, mail-ins, robocalls, real calls, radio ads, TV ads, they were all being very finely tuned for the particular audience. And the aim was basically to find the precise message that would trigger a kind of strong emotional response from the exact audience that was being sent to. Well, and often maybe not even a message in the sense of an issue, but just trying to create a certain candidate affect, as political scientists say, just to change people's feelings about candidates personally. Romney hates women, he wants to lock them in binders, or Obama wants to paint the country red. Or so that's one development we started to see, development of micro-targeting, where parties, and then also, as I'll talk about in a minute, outside groups try and very finely tune their message to particular audiences. The other development we've, of course, seen is increasing an even greater role for money. So in the wake of Citizens United decision and other Supreme Court decisions, it's become easier for outside groups to spend on politics, especially in particular to spend on ads, and they've taken advantage of that. I always like the names of these groups. They were sort of vague and mendacious. It's like Winning Our Future, Priorities USA. It's like, what do you guys call it? Americans for Truth and Beauty. What do you do? Oh, we're perfect. So, the two developments, the growth of increasingly sophisticated campaign machinery for targeting messages to people, trying to trigger from them special emotional responses about particular candidates, and the increasing possibility to spend huge amounts of money doing that without any restraint from the government. What should we make of all this? What does that mean for the future of truth in United States democracy? Well, one kind of concern you might have is that it's destructive of competitiveness in elections. It just means that one party might be able to gain a large advantage over the other party just by having more money. And that might be a concern. So you might think, look, if sophisticated targeting of voters wins elections and money allows more and better targeting, then the party with more money will consistently win. That's a concern you might have. Maybe that'll happen. Maybe not. Maybe for every Warren Buffett, there's a Charles Koch. Maybe for every wealthy corporation, there's a large union. Maybe these things will balance out. But there is that concern. But let's set that aside for the moment. Let's suppose that as far as the competitiveness of the election goes, as far as competition between the two big parties goes, this isn't going to be a big deal. They'll still duke it out. There'll just be more and more money on each side. Is that a worry? Well, it depends on what kind of view you have of democracy and what you care about. One kind of view associated with Joseph Schumpeter and more recently people like Judge Posner in Chicago, the main point of democracy is to just make sure that we avoid political elites creating huge disasters. So we need, democracy is just here so that we can have some minimal check on what political elites get up to. So really all you need to have a democratic system is to have regularly held competitive elections. But beyond that, the involvement of ordinary people doesn't matter much. In fact, maybe it's better if ordinary people aren't too much involved in politics, beyond just casting their vote at the ballot. It's better maybe if political elites do most of the thinking and opinion forming and all that stuff. And there's something to that. As we know from a lot of studies, the American public are not very informed about politics. Going around New Hampshire, a lot of people asked us, we were philosophy grad students, we thought, oh, we'll go around all these places and we'll have this, we'll try and convince people with the power of philosophy. And most places we go to, what do you think about Obama? And they say, which one is he again? I said, oh, he's a black guy. Oh, okay. And I still am not really sure exactly who Gene Shaheen is. But, so there's something to the Schumpeterian position. But there's another story about democracy, another way of thinking about democracy, according to which there's this ideal of freedom, which democracy helps us capture. Freedom in the Roman sense, or the sense that we inherit from the Romans, where it means self-governance. Freedom is a matter of obeying only ourselves, individually and collectively. In a free society, on this way of thinking, there's no distinct classes of rulers and ruled. In that society, as Rousseau put it, each unites with all, but obeys only himself, or herself, so she said. What does that mean, though? What does it take to have a society that's free in that sense? Well, you might think not just regularly held elections, where people will happen to vote one way or the other. It requires also that individual citizens exercise independence of mind, where they're not just pushed and pulled by elites, where they don't vote just based on the candidate affect and whatever however it happened to get triggered on a particular election, they considered the full range of issues and they exercised their own capacity for free reason and thought, and thus are not governed in their thinking by others. And it also perhaps requires active participation in the discussion that we have about politics from ordinary citizens. So the views and arguments that get considered are not just views and arguments put forward by political elites, but also by ordinary people. What does that mean for the future? What needs to happen? Well, one thing it might require, probably does require, I think, is some certain kinds of policy intervention. So, for instance, it might require stricter limits on campaign finance so that we don't have the arms race of money on both sides, which makes it very hard for those who have less to really participate meaningfully. But I don't think that policy solutions are the only thing that's needed here. I think partly where the freedom is achieved depends on how individual people act. I don't know exactly what the future's going to be like. I'm a philosopher. In fact, I don't really know anything. I just have to type pants. But you can imagine different possibilities. You can imagine that like McDonald's, the Democratic Party will host children's parties, so that you grow up with this happy feeling, and then every time you hear a Stevie Wonder song, you think, I must vote Democrat. Or maybe every time you receive an email that makes you feel depressed, someone reminds you that Romney is the source of your depression, or you can imagine all kinds of stuff. You can imagine all kinds of things that can happen given increasing technology that exists to target and reach people, for political elites to target and reach people. So there is that, if you like, offensive capacity. But there is also, it seems to me, increasing, if you like, the defensive technology. We have the ability to filter the messages we receive to some extent. Some people are worried about that, like Cass 17, for instance, says that's bad because people will just only look at messages that confirm what they already thought. But of course, we could use that filtering in other ways, just to try and sort the massive information that we get and try and make sure that we don't just hear only the views of elites, but also more diverse views. We can actively seek out relatively cheaply, if we make the effort, views that are from obscure or less well-known sources. And we can also make the effort relatively cheaply to disseminate our own ideas, which will only get heard if others make the effort to hear them. But it's something that the web and so on makes easier and cheaper in some ways. So it seems to me that there's a lot that ordinary people will have to do if we are to have something like a free society. That, as I explained at the beginning, means bearing a lot of costs. It means bearing those costs of spending time to think and to participate, but it might just turn out that liberty is costly. Thanks a lot.